Dominic Graves stood alone on the upper balcony of his seaside estate, the hush of twilight closing in around him. Below, waves rolled gently against the rocky shoreline, and the briny scent of the ocean floated up to mingle with the faint aroma of fresh varnish on the deck rails. In his hands, he held a thick folder stuffed with shipping reports, each page stamped with the bold logo of Graves Marine Logistics, the company he'd built from scratch. A brisk wind kicked up off the water. Dominic buttoned the collar of his light jacket and shifted his weight, glancing at the latest magazine resting on a small bistro table behind him. On the cover, his face stared back. Dominic Graves, the titan of coastal freight. Normally, that kind of recognition would spark pride, or at least satisfaction, but tonight it felt hollow. He rubbed a palm over his tired eyes, thinking of the back-to-back conference calls that had devoured his afternoon. Inside the mansion, the lights were low, giving the place a tranquil but almost too still ambiance. Most staff had clocked out for the day. Only a faint glow from the kitchen indicated the presence of the evening cook. Dominic's 9-year-old daughter, Charlie, should have been finishing her private tutoring session right about now. He resolved to join her for dinner soon, though he was already dreading the phone calls stacked up after that. Yet something weighed heavy on Dominic's mind, a nagging sense he'd been missing crucial moments in Charlie's life. He recalled the last chat they had 2 nights ago, maybe? She'd mentioned wanting him to see her new watercolor painting. He couldn't even remember if he'd looked at it. He sighed, flipping through the shipping reports one last time. Everything about him was business, schedules, and expansions. The orchard farmland he also owned, Graves Orchard, was practically an afterthought these days, managed by someone else. He rarely visited unless there was an investor pitch or a promotional photo op. The horizon glowed a molten orange as the sun sank lower. Dominic closed the folder and stepped back inside. He was about to call out for Charlie when an urgent footfall echoed from the grand staircase. Oswald, the longtime butler, rushed in with an anxious expression. "Sir, you need to come upstairs now." Dominic's heart lurched. "Oswald, what's wrong?" "It's Miss Charlie, sir. She's burning up with fever, passed out in her bedroom. I've already rung the driver. The car's waiting." For a second, the world stopped. Then Dominic moved in a flash, nearly dropping the stack of paperwork. He followed Oswald upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, dread curling in his stomach. Charlie lay unconscious across her duvet, cheeks flushed and damp with sweat. A half-finished watercolor sketch sat on her desk. The bright green paint was still wet, drips trailing off the paper onto the hardwood floor. Dominic knelt by the bed and touched her forehead. The heat of her skin jolted him. She's really warm. Damn it, how did this happen so fast?" He scooped Charlie gently into his arms. She was small, frighteningly light. Her eyelids fluttered but stayed closed. "Sir," Oswald murmured, stepping forward to help. "We must hurry." Carrying his daughter down the stairs, Dominic ignored the worried stares of the staff. Outside, the coastal wind whipped at them, tangling Charlie's hair against his sleeve. The driver had the rear door open. Dominic eased Charlie onto the back seat, cradling her head. He jumped in beside her without a second thought. As they sped away from the estate, he pressed a cool handkerchief to her forehead, panic rising like bile in his throat. "Hang on, kid," he whispered into the hush of the tinted car cabin. "I'm right here." Minutes stretched like hours, but the hospital finally came into view. The building's fluorescent lights hummed in the early evening gloom, and the place bustled with people. A nurse with a wheelchair rushed over the moment they pulled up. Dominic scooped Charlie up again, muttering to her limp form, "We're gonna figure this out, okay? Dad's got you." A swirl of medical staff parted, letting Dominic carry her down the corridor. The overhead lights in the triage area were stark, glaring off the polished floor. A sharp whiff of antiseptic hit him, and the beep of equipment felt like tiny hammers striking his skull. It took everything in him to keep it together as the nurses led them to a pediatric exam room. They peppered him with questions about Charlie's health history, allergies, and recent symptoms. Dominic realized with a sick jolt that he couldn't recall the last time he'd personally taken her to a routine checkup. His personal assistant usually handled that. Finally, a doctor stepped in, wearing a no-nonsense expression. They ushered Dominic back just enough to begin their examination. Through the glass pane in the door, he watched them slip an IV into Charlie's small arm, hooking her to monitors. Her face was pale except for the angry flush of fever, and her little fingers twitched unconsciously. One of the nurses coaxed Dominic into stepping outside the room, promising to update him. He pressed his ear to the door, hearing the murmur of quick medical jargon he couldn't decipher. Fear weighed like lead in his gut. Everything in Dominic's world, money, prestige, awards, shrank into insignificance. He would have traded it all right there for a guarantee that Charlie was going to be fine. By the time midnight rolled around, Dominic felt like he'd been through a war. The hospital walls were a harsh white under fluorescent lights, and the faint odor of disinfectant clung to every breath he took. He slumped in a vinyl chair by the pediatric ward's corridor, legs splayed, a million thoughts racing in his head. About an hour ago, Dr. Lowry, a middle-aged woman with kind but firm eyes, had summoned him into a cramped conference room. She explained Charlie's condition in direct, clinical terms, though Dominic struggled to keep up with the barrage of medical details. "We suspect an autoimmune disorder. Essentially, her body is attacking its own blood cells." He just blinked at her, his mind blank. "Is it treatable?" he'd asked in a hoarse whisper. "Potentially, yes. But the real concern is she needs a very specific type of transfusion. Charlie's blood type is extremely rare. We've checked our local database, no immediate matches. It'll take time to find a donor." Dominic had reeled back like she'd slapped him. Time? He didn't have time. Charlie might not have time. Now, drifting in and out of a miserable daze, Dominic stared at the tiles beneath his polished loafers. He'd tossed his suit jacket aside hours ago. His tie was loose, shirt wrinkled. For once, he was just a frightened father, not a business kingpin. He racked his brain for a solution. Money could do many things, he'd learned that firsthand. He'd built an empire from the ground up. If he needed to buy medical equipment, fund an entire research wing, or fly in specialists from another continent, he would. But none of that mattered without the right donor. This was uncharted territory where his bank account offered no quick fix. A nurse poked her head out of Charlie's room. "Mr. Graves, she's stable for the moment. You can sit with her if you like." Dominic was on his feet at once. Inside the room, the hush was punctured only by the soft beep of monitors. Charlie lay on a narrow hospital bed, an IV drip hooking into her left arm, oxygen prongs under her nose. Her dark eyelashes seemed even darker against her pale cheeks. Dominic gently rested a hand on her forearm. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. He reached for a plastic chair next to the bed. His phone buzzed, but he ignored it. The only thing that mattered was keeping vigil over his daughter. She was all he had left after Addison passed away 5 years ago. He suddenly recalled a memory of Addison. Her gentle laugh echoing in the orchard, teasing him about a pair of muddy boots she wore while picking peaches. It felt like a lifetime ago. He swallowed, gazing down at Charlie's fragile form. That sweet, artistic child who never complained about him missing dinners or skipping her art shows at school. She deserved better, so much better. When a nurse approached to check vitals, Dominic cleared his throat. "I want to start searching beyond the city for a donor. We can pay for transport, testing, whatever it takes," he said, voice edged with desperation. She nodded empathetically. "We'll coordinate with the hospital system and put out urgent calls. Just be prepared, it might be a while." Dominic hated that answer. He needed immediate action. His mind churned, thinking of all the influential people he knew, all the connections he could tap. But that was no guarantee, just a shot in the dark. He felt more powerless than ever before. For the next few hours, he wandered the hallway, consulting with staff, double-checking that every call was made, every resource mobilized. Night bled into the earliest hours of morning. At some point, he found himself slumped against a vending machine, a stale coffee in hand, running on fumes. Charlie's condition held steady, but the doctors cautioned it was a waiting game. They needed that transfusion soon. He lifted the lukewarm coffee to his lips and nearly gagged on the bitterness. A wave of exhaustion slammed over him. He realized he hadn't eaten since lunchtime but couldn't stomach the thought of food. Somewhere in the corridor, a child cried softly in another room. The sound brought an ache to Dominic's chest. This hospital was full of stories, full of parents pacing floors in anguish, full of heartbreak and hope. He'd never bothered to think about it before, never had to, but now he was right in the thick of it. Around 4 a.m., he returned to Charlie's bedside. She dozed fitfully. Dominic gently brushed back her hair, studying the subtle freckles across her cheeks, signs of the time she'd played in the orchard under Addison's watchful eye. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could hear. A soft knock on the doorframe made him look up. It was Dr. Lowry again, looking tired but resolute. She told him quietly, "We'll keep searching. If we can't locate a local match, we'll reach out regionally, then internationally. But let me be honest, this might take days or weeks." She didn't say what might happen if Charlie's condition worsened in the meantime, but the implication hung in the sterile air. "Thank you," Dominic managed. Left alone once more, he sank down and folded his arms on the edge of Charlie's bed, leaning his forehead on them. The beep-beep of the monitor was the only thing reminding him that she was still alive, still fighting. "Come on, baby," he murmured, tears burning his eyes. "Please hold on." Dawn arrived stealthily, painting the sky outside the hospital windows a muted gray. Dominic had nodded off in Charlie's room for maybe 20 minutes when he jolted awake, heart pounding. He reached for her hand, still warm, still frighteningly fragile. The nurses had come and gone to check vitals, leaving him with quiet updates that she was stable for now. The corridor bustled with the early shift, interns scurrying around with charts, and the occasional hush of a patient being wheeled to an exam. Dominic rubbed his temples, fighting off a headache from lack of sleep. A text on his phone from his CFO read, "Urgent. Asia deal needs final approval." He scowled, ignoring it. Nothing was more urgent than Charlie. He couldn't care less if the entire shipping network ground to a halt. He stepped out for a breath of fresh air. The main entrance of the hospital opened onto a small courtyard surrounded by overgrown shrubs. The morning chill bit through his rumpled dress shirt, making him wish he'd grabbed a jacket. He needed to clear his head, maybe call a few more contacts. If no one in the city matched Charlie's blood type, maybe someone in his orchard workforce or shipping offices might. He'd comb the entire East Coast if he had to. As he pulled out his phone to start messaging, he caught a glimpse of someone huddled near the courtyard gate, a slight figure, probably no older than 12 or 13, wearing a threadbare hoodie and jeans that looked 2 sizes too big. The kid's sneakers were tattered, one sole flapping with each step. Something about the posture alert, almost wary, made Dominic look twice. The boy leaned against a metal fence post, watching the hospital entrance with a strange intensity. Every time a staff member or visitor hustled by, he seemed to shrink into the shadows. Dominic wondered if the kid was waiting for someone, a family member, maybe. He turned back to his phone, but a moment later heard the boy's soft voice cut through the hush. Hey, mister, you got a sec?" Dominic frowned, stepping closer. "Yes? Are you lost?" The boy shuffled, eyes darting around. He had short brown hair, messy from the wind, and faint smudges of dirt on his cheeks. He might have been handsome if not for the wary, guarded look. "You're the one with the sick daughter, right? The man in the suit last night?" Dominic's heart slammed. How do you know that?" "I saw you rush in with her." The kid's voice was raspy, maybe from sleeping outside in the cold. "Heard the nurses talking too. Something about a rare blood type." Anxiety crackled up Dominic's spine. Why was this boy eavesdropping? That's private hospital business. Who are you? The kid stepped forward into a strip of pale morning light. "Name's Bryce," he said in a low tone. I think my blood's the same type as your daughter's. AB negative, right?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "How do you?" But Bryce just shrugged. "I've donated before. They told me I'm AB negative, real rare, hard to find donors." A wave of disbelief and a faint spark of hope warred in Dominic's chest. This was either a bizarre coincidence or some street kid trying to hustle him. "Look, if you're messing around," Bryce lifted both hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm not. If it'll help your daughter test me, I'll prove it." Dominic stared, wanting to question everything. Yet in his desperation, it felt like a lifeline. "You realize what you're saying? You're telling me you can save her." "I'm saying I'll try," Bryce corrected. He looked away, tucking his hands into the hoodie's front pocket. But I don't want anything shady in return. No news crews, no big fuss. Just get me tested. All Dominic's instincts screamed caution, but he couldn't ignore the possibility. Fine, I'll get the hospital staff to run a test. But where are your parents? The boy's expression hardened. Don't have any. Miss Parker runs the homeless shelter near the docks. I crash there sometimes. That's enough family for me. Dominic's pulse hammered. The kid was basically an orphan. No guardians, no stable home. By all appearances, he was also suspiciously calm about offering to give blood. Let's talk to the hospital staff, Dominic said, gesturing for Bryce to follow. They'll need to do some legal checks, you being a minor and all. Bryce hesitated, scanning the courtyard as though expecting someone to jump out. Finally, he nodded. All right, lead the way. Moments later, Dominic flagged down a nurse inside the emergency desk. Her eyes flicked to Bryce with a mixture of suspicion and pity. He says he's AB negative. We need to confirm, Dominic explained, heart pounding. It could be. Important. The nurse looked uncertain. Yes, sir. But we'll need a consent form. Legal paperwork. Dominic ran a hand through his disheveled hair. We'll handle that. Page doctor. Lowry, please. Tell her Dominic Graves urgently needs to see her. They sat Bryce in a small alcove near the lab corridor. He fiddled with the strings of his hoodie, gaze roving over the bright posters advertising flu shots and blood drive campaigns. Dominic stood a few feet away, arms crossed, scanning Bryce for any clue to the boy's story. He had the lean, wiry build of a kid who'd gone hungry more than once, the caution of someone who'd learned not to trust adults easily. Eventually, Dr. Lowry approached, brows arched at the unusual scene. Dominic introduced her to Bryce, explaining what the boy claimed. She asked Bryce a few direct questions where he found out about his blood type. Had he ever donated, any health issues? Bryce answered with calm, clipped honesty. He'd donated at a local drive once last year, forging some papers for a bit of cash. They told him he was AB negative. He'd lied about being older just to get by. That confession made Dominic's stomach clench. Dr. Lowry nodded slowly. Well, let's do a preliminary test. She glanced at Dominic. But I need to inform you, legally. We can't proceed with a transfusion unless a guardian or a court order is in place. He's under 18. Dominic swallowed, realizing the labyrinth of red tape. I'll handle it, he promised, mentally mapping which judge he could call at this hour. Just test him, please. In a stark white exam room, a phlebotomist took Bryce's blood sample. The boy barely flinched, eyes steady as the needle slid in. Dominic hovered near the door, trying not to pace. This might be Charlie's last shot. He couldn't stand it. Bryce looked up, catching Dominic's gaze. Don't get your hopes up too high. Sometimes these things don't work out. Something about Bryce's quiet, resigned tone sent a pang through Dominic's chest. Why are you doing this? He asked softly. You barely know me or my daughter. Bryce pursed his lips. Call it a hunch, or a reminder of someone I knew who needed help once. Dominic wanted to pry further, but the phlebotomist finished quickly, and an attendant whisked the sample away to the lab. They led Bryce back to a waiting area, offering him water and snacks. Dominic lingered by the hallway, bracing himself for an endless wait. But it wasn't long, maybe half an hour, when Dr. Lowry returned with a stunned expression. She spoke in a low voice so Bryce couldn't hear. The preliminary typing confirms it. He's AB negative, a match. Her tone hinted at relief, but also worry. We'll need more tests to ensure compatibility for Charlie's condition, but it's looking promising. I've never seen luck like this. Dominic exhaled a tremulous breath, a swirl of gratitude and disbelief. That's incredible. He shot a glance at Bryce through the glass partition. The boy sat alone, nibbling on a stale cookie, eyes scanning the bustling corridor like a cornered cat. How soon can we begin? He asked Dr. Lowry. She pressed her lips together. We'll need a couple more hours of thorough screening. Then there's the matter of legal consent. But if all goes well, possibly tonight. Dominic nodded, adrenaline pumping. I'll call my legal team. They'll handle everything. Already he was pulling out his phone, rattling off instructions to get an emergency court order or some fast-track authorization. Despite the swirl of activity, his mind fixed on one simple fact. There was hope for Charlie, a real chance. And that hope came from a disheveled, wary kid who had every reason to walk away but chose not to. Maybe, Dominic thought with a sudden heaviness, the universe was giving him a second chance to do something right by both children. Because an odd feeling gnawed at him, a sense that Bryce's presence wasn't just coincidence. He couldn't put his finger on it yet, but as he scrolled through old orchard records on his phone, searching for Felicity's name or anything connecting them, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. He had a creeping suspicion that his life was about to be turned completely upside down. Back in Charlie's hospital room that afternoon, sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. Machines beeped softly, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. Charlie had stirred for a brief moment earlier, blinking up at Dominic with confused eyes, but she drifted off again, exhausted by the fever and medication. Outside, staff were busy prepping for a possible transfusion. Bryce had vanished temporarily into a flurry of additional tests, leaving Dominic alone with his thoughts. He felt battered mentally, emotionally. Yet an anxious hope pulsed in him, lighting a fire that he wasn't sure how to contain. His phone vibrated. It was Miss Parker from the shelter returning his call. He stepped into the corridor to speak privately. "Mr. Graves," she said in a firm, no-nonsense tone, "I hear you found Bryce. He's quite the wanderer, that one." Dominic cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. He volunteered to donate blood for my daughter. We need to expedite legal forms so the hospital can proceed." A loaded silence followed. "Dominic, Bryce is under my supervision in a loose sense, but the boy's basically on his own. He's stubborn, hates charity. Are you sure this is safe for him?" He hesitated. "The doctors are running thorough checks. If he's healthy enough, they'll do the transfusion. Trust me, Miss Parker, I wouldn't risk his well-being. I'm desperate. Charlie's slipping through my fingers." Miss Parker's sigh crackled over the line. "I'll do what I can to sign off on medical guardianship for the procedure. But don't think that solves everything. Bryce has been burned before, promised big gestures that never came through. Just be careful, okay? Don't give him false hope." Dominic swallowed hard. Understood. He ended the call, a strange pang in his chest. Who had burned Bryce before? The kid clearly carried a lot on his shoulders. But Dominic didn't have time to dwell on it. He re-entered Charlie's room and found Dr. Lowry waiting, along with a nurse pushing a cart of medical supplies. Bryce trailed behind, gaze flicking warily around the equipment. "We're ready to begin the transfusion soon," Dr. Lowry announced. "Bryce cleared his screenings. The judge approved emergency authorization on your word and Miss Parker's signature. Are you both ready?" Dominic glanced at Bryce, who looked more determined than scared. He nodded stiffly. "Yeah, let's get it over with." Before they moved forward, Dominic gently gripped Bryce's shoulder. The boy stiffened but didn't pull away. "Thank you," Dominic said, voice raw. "You're giving Charlie a chance she might not have otherwise." Bryce shrugged, eyes on the floor. "Just doing what's right." They wheeled 2 beds side by side in a small, private procedure room. Charlie lay on the left, sedated, her face still flushed with fever. Bryce climbed onto the right bed, pulling at his hoodie anxiously until a nurse offered to store it safely. Underneath, his shirt was threadbare, revealing a tooth-in frame. Dominic's gut twisted at the sight, guilt washing over him for reasons he couldn't yet name. Dr. Lowry explained each step, hooking Bryce to an IV line, carefully transferring blood. Dominic hovered, arms folded, a tangle of fear and relief. He noticed Bryce occasionally glancing at Charlie, a flicker of empathy crossing his features. As the procedure began, the hum of machines and the beep of monitors set a tense rhythm. Bryce shut his eyes, expression tight but calm. Charlie remained unconscious, though her vitals showed stable improvement. It could take hours, Dr. Lowry warned, but everything was going smoothly so far. Dominic forced himself to sit on a stool between them, torn between watching his daughter's face for signs of color returning and sneaking concerned glances at Bryce. A teen volunteer approached, offering juice and snacks in case Bryce needed a sugar boost. The kid drank quietly, swallowing each sip like it might be his last. Eventually, Dominic's phone buzzed with an email notification. In an impulsive moment, he checked at some orchard staffing updates from Miss Green. He skimmed the text until a single word froze him. Felicity. The email mentioned Felicity's old orchard records had been found in a storage closet, detailing specialized fruit tree breeding she had started. He tapped open the attached file. A line read, Felicity Brooks hired as orchard assistant, left abruptly 12 years ago, no further contact. 12 years ago. Dominic's heart hammered. That was around the time Addison was pregnant with Charlie, and also the time he'd had an affair during a rocky period in his marriage. The memory flashed, a quiet night among orchard rows, Felicity's gentle laughter, an unplanned moment that haunted him afterward. Could Bryce be that child? He set the phone aside with trembling hands. Suddenly, the logic clicked. Bryce about 11 or 12, no official guardians, mother's name Felicity, orchard connection. A jagged wave of shock and guilt punched him in the chest. If that was true, then Charlie was being saved by her half-brother, and neither of them knew. At that moment, Dr. Lowry approached, a faint smile. Charlie's vitals are responding well. She's not out of the woods, but this transfusion is definitely helping. She eyed Dominic's pale face. Are you all right? He forced a nod, swallowing back the tumult of emotions. Yeah, just processing. After a while, the transfusion ended. The staff carefully disconnected Bryce's IV line. Charlie's color had improved slightly. The immediate crisis seemed to be easing. Bryce sat up, rubbing his arm where the needle had been. So, that's it? Dr. Lowry nodded. We'll keep Charlie for observation. You should rest for a bit, too. Bryce hopped off the bed, wobbling just a bit. Dominic stood up, trying to speak. You should probably stay here. Let them keep an eye on you. And also my daughter, she'll want to thank, but Bryce waved him off. I'm fine, really. I don't belong in a hospital room. He reached for his hoodie, draping it over one shoulder. Look, I did what I could. Good luck with her, Mr. Graves. His tone was weary, final. Dominic's pulse skittered. He felt an urgent need to stop Bryce, ask about Felicity, about everything. But the boy's posture radiated a desire to bolt. Bryce, wait, please, he blurted. We need to talk. The kid turned, eyes flicking nervously between Dominic and the nurses. About what? I helped your daughter, that's all. Dominic steeled himself, glancing to ensure Dr. Lowry was out of earshot. He lowered his voice. I think you might be my son. His words sounded surreal, even to his own ears. Bryce's face went rigid, lips parting in shock. Then, in a burst of motion, he shook his head furiously. That's not. No. Felicity, my mom never said. A swirl of guilt, heartbreak, confusion tore through Dominic. I didn't know, Bryce. I swear I didn't know. She left the orchard before... Before he could finish, Bryce stumbled back a step, anger and betrayal flaring in his eyes. You left her to rot. She got sick, and no one gave a damn. If you really are my father, where were you? Dominic couldn't answer. The words died in his throat, replaced by a crushing wave of regret. Bryce stared, tears threatening behind raw fury. Then he turned on his heel and bolted out the door into the corridor. Bryce, wait! Dominic lurched after him, but the boy was gone. In that moment, it felt like the floor dropped out from under Dominic's life. The sweet relief of Charlie's transfusion collided with the devastating realization he had failed another child, a son. He sagged against the wall, pulse roaring in his ears. Down the hall, he heard an alarm beep on Charlie's monitor, staff bustling to adjust her IV. Torn between chasing Bryce and staying with his daughter, Dominic clenched his fists in helplessness. The secrets of the past had spilled into the open at the worst possible time. Everything had changed. Outside, the sun dipped behind stormy clouds, casting long shadows through the hospital windows, and Dominic Graves wondered if he'd just lost his only chance to do right by both of his children. The sterile scent of antiseptic still clung to every corner of Charlie's hospital room, but the tension had lifted like a morning fog. Outside the window, the sun cut through wispy clouds, throwing patches of warm light onto the linoleum floor. Dominic stood by the bed, arms folded, staring at his daughter's sleeping form. Her cheeks, now a touch rosier, rose and fell in a gentle rhythm. He couldn't help but feel a soft rush of relief. Just hours earlier, Charlie had been in serious danger, her small body battling that rare autoimmune condition. Now, thanks to that makeshift transfusion, she seemed to be stabilizing like a wilting plant that finally got the water it needed. A nurse bustled in quietly, checking vitals. With a hushed smile, she nodded at Dominic. Her temperature's been normal for the last hour. If everything keeps steady, we might talk about discharge soon. Dominic exhaled, releasing a breath he felt he'd been holding for days. That's wonderful, he murmured. He eased a hand over Charlie's forehead, feeling only the slight warmth of a mild fever instead of that intense heat from before. He kept replaying the dramatic scene in his head, Bryce on the bed next to Charlie, donating blood that matched hers exactly. And then the explosive moment when Dominic realized the kid might be his own son born from a brief encounter with Felicity years ago. Where is he now? Dominic asked himself, guilt settling in. Right after the transfusion, Bryce had taken off, ignoring Dominic's pleas to talk. The heartbreak in that boy's eyes still stung him. Mr. Graves? The voice belonged to a petite woman with curly salt-and-pepper hair, Miss Parker, the caretaker from the homeless shelter. She stood at the threshold of Charlie's room, face marked by concern. I spoke to the nurses. They said your daughter's doing better? Dominic nodded, stepping away from the bed. Yes, she's improving. Thank you for coming. Miss Parker's gaze flicked to Charlie before settling on Dominic. I just stopped by to check on Bryce, but I heard he already left. She sighed. He does that vanishes when things get too personal. I see. Dominic tried to keep his voice steady, but the regret seeped through. He helped Charlie, then disappeared. I never properly thanked him. Miss Parker pursed her lips. You're not alone. Bryce has a habit of walking out if he feels cornered. He's a guarded kid. Got plenty of reasons to distrust folks, especially folks with money. Her tone hinted at unsaid stories, the weight of which Dominic could only guess. I appreciate any help you can give me, Dominic said softly. I need to see him again to explain. Explain what? Miss Parker raised a brow, crossing her arms. Dominic's mouth went dry. He didn't want to divulge the entire personal drama here in the corridor, but Miss Parker's stare was firm, like she already suspected something bigger was at play. He cleared his throat. I think Bryce might be connected to my orchard business. His mother, Felicity, worked there years ago. The caretaker's expression shifted, part curiosity, part concern. I'd heard rumors Felicity had ties to some landowner. Didn't realize it was you. It's complicated, but please, if you see Bryce, tell him I'd like to talk. Not out of pity, not to throw money around, just to set things right. Miss Parker's eyes flickered with guarded understanding. She fished a small notepad from her jacket and scrawled something down. This is the address of the shelter near the docks. If Bryce returns, I'll try to pass the message along, but no guarantees he's like the tide, always slipping in and out. Dominic accepted the paper. Thank you. She glanced at Charlie again, her posture softening. I'm glad your little girl is okay. The world's short on second chances. With that, Miss Parker left, footsteps echoing down the hushed hallway. Dominic stood there, the slip of paper in his hand, feeling the weight of his past pushing down on his shoulders. Charlie stirred later that afternoon, blinking in confusion at the IV taped to her arm. Dominic leaned forward, offering a gentle smile. Hey there, sleepyhead. She squinted, then broke into a tentative grin. Daddy, what happened? You had a pretty rough fever, he said, keeping his tone warm. But you're getting better now. He ruffled her hair carefully. You'll be out of here soon. Charlie looked around, eyes wide at the beep of monitors and the sight of half-empty fluid bags. Then she frowned. I remember feeling dizzy and something about a boy. Her voice was soft. I had a dream there was a boy who said he was helping me. He was wearing an old hoodie and... She trailed off, searching Dominic's face. Was that real, or did I imagine it? Dominic hesitated, recalling Bryce's determined expression. It was real. He's, someone who volunteered to donate blood that matched yours perfectly. Charlie's lips parted in an O. She tried to prop herself upright against the pillows, the IV tube shifting around her. Where is he? Can I thank him? Dominic's chest tightened. How could he explain that the boy vanished, or that the boy might be her half-brother? He wasn't ready to drop that bombshell. He left, Dominic said, choosing his words carefully. He's a bit private, but I'm hoping we can find him again soon. Charlie's gaze lingered on Dominic's face, as if she sensed there was more he wasn't telling. But after a moment, she gave a small nod. Okay, I just wish I could say thanks. What's his name? Bryce, Dominic said quietly. He helped you a lot, honey. She stared at the blanket, picking at invisible lint. A faint tremor of sadness crossed her features, replaced by a shy hope. If you see him, tell him I'm really grateful. He saved me, didn't he? Dominic swallowed. Yes, Charlie, he did. Suddenly she smiled bright and pure. Then he's like an angel, right? Dominic felt the pinch of guilt. If only she knew something like that, he answered. Hours later, Charlie managed to shuffle around the hospital corridor with the help of a nurse, regaining her strength. Dominic watched with a mix of pride and relief. The doctors proposed keeping her overnight just to be safe, but it was clear she was on the mend. Dominic used that brief window to make a phone call. Stepping into a small courtyard shaded by palm trees rustling in the coastal breeze, he dialed Miss Green, the longtime manager at Graves Orchard. She picked up on the second ring, her voice carrying the non-nonsense tone of a woman who spent years running a tight farm. Dominic? I heard about Charlie. My goodness, is she okay? She's improving, Dominic said, shoulders sagging in relief. We had a miracle donor. But there's something else, Miss Green. Remember Felicity from about 12 years ago? Miss Green let out a quiet gasp. Felicity Brooks, you mean? Hard to forget. She was so passionate about crossbreeding fruit trees and preserving older varieties. Then one day she vanished. Dominic's gaze flicked to the sky, still tinted with the fading gold of late afternoon. I need to confirm a few details about her. Did she leave any records behind? A contact, mention of a child, anything? A pause. Then Miss Green's voice grew softer. I recall some notebooks she kept in the orchard storage room. They're probably buried under old fertilizer receipts and tool ledgers. I can dig them up if you want. Please do, Dominic said, fighting a swell of emotion. And Miss Green, this is urgent. I suspect Felicity had a son named Bryce. I think... He closed his eyes. I think he might be mine. An audible inhale crackled over the line. Dominic, are you certain? No, he murmured. But I have reasons to believe so. Let me know if you find those notebooks. They exchanged goodbyes. As he ended the call, Dominic stared at the reflection of his face in the phone's black screen. He barely recognized the haunted expression staring back. For a man known for controlling every corner of his empire, he sure had a mountain of regrets stacking up. He spun on his heel and headed back inside. By tomorrow, if Charlie's health stayed on course, they'd release her. And then he'd figure out a way to track Bryce. Because if he truly was Felicity's child, his child Dominic had a responsibility to face that truth head-on. No more running, no more ignoring phone calls or emails like he once did with Felicity. As he returned to Charlie's room, he caught sight of her dozing, an IV still taped to her little arm, but her face peaceful. A jolt of resolve surged in him. He might not be able to fix the past, but he had to try. For Charlie's sake, for Bryce's sake, for his own. The next morning, the hospital corridors hummed with typical weekday bustle nurses checking charts, visitors clutching balloons, and the constant jingle of gurney wheels on tile. Charlie had been cleared to go home around lunchtime, so Dominic was busy completing the last bits of discharge paperwork at the reception desk. Every so often, he glanced over his shoulder at Charlie, who sat in a lobby chair with a plush blanket around her shoulders. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where a sliver of the ocean was visible in the distance, blue and shimmering under the sun. Miss Parker's address for the shelter burned a hole in Dominic's pocket. He hadn't gone there yet, wanting first to settle Charlie in, but his mind kept replaying the caretaker's words. He's a guarded kid, be careful. A voice inside whispered that Bryce might slip away for good if Dominic didn't act fast. Still, Charlie came first. She needed a quiet place to rest. maybe even a dash of normalcy after these harrowing days. Dominic mentally listed the orchard as well, a place once so full of life under Addison's influence, then overshadowed by the expansions of his shipping empire. That orchard might hold the key to understanding Felicity's secrets. He finished signing, thanked the receptionist, and motioned to Charlie. "Hey, kiddo, you ready to blow this popsicle stand?" She wrinkled her nose but grinned. "Yes, hospital jello is weird, tastes like rubber." Dominic chuckled, relieved to see a glimmer of her usual sass. He guided her to the elevator, one arm protectively around her shoulders. As they descended, Charlie peered up. "Daddy, are you okay?" "You look worried." He inhaled. "I'm fine, sweet pea. Just thinking about everything that's happened." He paused, searching her expression. "And about Bryce." Her eyes brightened at the name. "You're gonna find him, right?" "I hope so," Dominic murmured. "There's more to it than you realize." Charlie tilted her head. "More?" His heart hammered. He was in no shape to explain half-siblings and lost mothers just yet. "We'll talk about it soon. Let's get you home and settled first." She didn't push further, but curiosity shone in her eyes as they stepped out of the elevator onto the ground floor. An hour later, Dominic's black SUV pulled into the long driveway of the Graves seaside estate. The mansion rose against the horizon, pale stone framed by tall palm trees swaying in a brisk, salt-kissed wind. Charlie leaned her forehead against the window, watching gulls swoop lazily over the water's edge. When they reached the front steps, Oswald the butler hurried out to greet them, face etched with relief. "Miss Charlie, so good to have you home. Let me help with your bag." Charlie offered a polite smile. "Thanks, Oswald." Inside, the house felt oddly silent, despite the staff's attempts to keep it warm and inviting. Dominic rubbed Charlie's back gently. "Why don't you rest in your room, kiddo? I'll bring up some soup or something." She nodded, letting the butler guide her upstairs. Once she was out of sight, Dominic stood in the foyer, raking a hand through his hair. The enormity of all he'd neglected the orchard, Felicity, Bryce pressed on him like a weight. Then his phone buzzed. He fished it out, heart jolting at the sight of Miss Green's name. He stepped into the quiet parlor to answer. "Dominic? I found Felicity's old notebooks." Miss Green sounded breathless, like she'd been rummaging in a dusty attic all morning. "They're scribbled with orchard notes and personal sketches. There's also a small stash of letters she never mailed, at least that's what it looks like." Dominic's throat tightened. "Letters addressed to me?" "Hard to say. I only skimmed the top pages. But I see your name mentioned. She wrote about wanting to expand some orchard projects, something about new citrus crossbreeds." A pang of regret shot through him. "Thank you, Miss Green. Keep them safe. I'll come out to the orchard soon, maybe tomorrow morning." "Sure thing, boss," Miss Green replied, kindness edging her words. "And Dominic, I'm sorry. Felicity was a good soul. She didn't deserve to slip through the cracks." He swallowed painfully. "I know. I intend to fix what I can." After they hung up, Dominic paced the parlor, steps muffled by the plush Persian rug. The wind from the sea whistled faintly through the tall windows. A swirl of emotions churned in his gut: anger at himself for ignoring Felicity's attempts to reach him, sorrow at the possibility that Bryce had grown up believing no one cared. "I should go to the shelter," he decided abruptly. Even if Bryce wasn't there yet, Miss Parker might have leads. Charlie was safe at home under Oswald's watch, and Dominic could do a quick round trip to the docks. Better to move now before the kid disappears completely. Mind made up, he snagged his car keys and told Oswald he'd be back shortly. Then he strode down the ornate steps, out to the driveway. The gulls cried overhead, almost echoing his restless mood. The drive to the waterfront took less than 20 minutes, city traffic easing as he neared the industrial zone of shipping crates, warehouses, and old boat repair shops. It was a far cry from the tourist-friendly beaches on the other side of town. Here, rusted chain-link fences lined potholed roads, and battered signs announced discount fishing gear or used auto parts. Dominic spotted a faded sign reading Seabreeze Homeless Shelter, tacked onto a low concrete building. Paint peeled around the windows, and a small queue of men and women waited outside for the afternoon meal. Pulling into a cramped lot, he felt a stab of unease. He realized with guilty clarity that he'd never come here in person. Despite it existing in the city he practically dominated with shipping routes and orchard produce. Stepping inside, the smell of canned soup and disinfectant greeted him. The entry room had old linoleum floors, walls plastered with job postings, a flickering overhead light. A weary volunteer behind a makeshift reception desk eyed him warily. He approached, clearing his throat. "My name is Dominic Graves. Miss Parker told me to come by. I'm looking for Bryce." The volunteer's eyebrows shot up at Dominic's crisp suit and expensive watch. "You, fancy a donation drive or something?" "Actually, I'm trying to find a specific boy. Miss Parker can explain. Is she here?" The volunteer nodded. "She's in the back office. Go on in." Dominic wove past rows of folding chairs and a table set up with hot meals. The people gathered looked at him with a mix of curiosity and indifference, some too wrapped in their own struggles to care about a well-dressed stranger. In the office, Miss Parker was hunched over a battered computer, scanning a screen with frustration. She glanced up, startled. "Oh, Mr. Graves, didn't think you'd come so soon." "Where's Bryce? Have you seen him?" Dominic asked, voice taut with urgency. Miss Parker sighed, pushing away from the desk. "He hasn't shown up today nor last night. Could be anywhere. He drifts." Dominic's shoulders sagged. "Do you know any spots he might frequent?" She reached for a manila folder, rummaging through to find a small slip of paper. "I do know he sometimes helps out at a community kitchen on West Harbor Street. He's got a soft spot for folks hungrier than him, believe it or not." She hesitated. "But if you show up there all official-looking, you might spook him. Bryce is skittish about feeling cornered." Dominic closed his eyes for a beat. "I'll keep that in mind." "Miss." Parker studied him, arms folded. "Any reason this is so urgent?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he said quietly, "I have strong reasons to believe Bryce is my child. I lost contact with his mother, Felicity, ages ago. I messed up. Now I need to make it right." Something in Miss Parker's gaze softened, though she stayed guarded. "You realize that kid's been let down so many times. If you swoop in and can't deliver, it'll hurt him more." "I understand," Dominic said, voice cracking. "All I can do is try." The older woman inhaled, then handed him the slip of paper. "Address for that soup kitchen. Just be gentle with him. Bryce might act tough, but he's got a fragile heart." Dominic nodded. "Thank you." He turned, heading back to his car with a swirl of determination. Next stop, the orchard. Then, hopefully, he'd piece together enough of Felicity's story to approach Bryce with honesty. No more secrets, no more running. Charlie's second evening home felt strangely calm. She curled up on the living room couch, wearing cozy pajamas with little starfish printed on them, flipping through a library book about sea creatures. Nearby, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dazzling view of the ocean at twilight. Boats twinkled on the horizon, their lights bobbing in the gentle swells. Dominic hovered in the background, unsure how to resume normal father-daughter life. He'd prepared a modest dinner: chicken soup, crackers, and fruit. Charlie had eaten about half before her energy flagged, but she insisted on staying downstairs to read instead of heading straight to bed. Now, her gaze kept sneaking toward him. Finally, she set the book aside with a soft sigh. "Dad?" He stiffened. She rarely called him Dad so directly, it was usually Daddy. Something about her tone told him this conversation would be serious. "Yes, Charlie?" She patted the couch cushion next to her. He crossed the room and sank down, feeling her eyes on him. Her voice wavered. "I've been thinking about Bryce, and about that day in the hospital. You acted, well, kind of weird after he left." Dominic's pulse quickened. She was perceptive, just like Addison used to be. He forced a casual tone. "It was a big shock. Him showing up at the perfect moment to help you. I didn't know how to handle it." Charlie bit her lip. "There's more than that, though, right? You keep mentioning Felicity or orchard stuff. Bryce is connected to you somehow, like family." She studied him, tears glinting in her eyes. "Is he my brother?" The blunt question hit him like a punch. He opened his mouth, no words coming out. Finally, he exhaled, shoulders slumping. "Charlie, I suspect he might be your half-brother. I'm not 100% sure, but everything points that way. Her lips trembled. She pressed her fingers to them, digesting the news. For a moment, the hush of the waves outside filled the silence. How did you not know? She asked softly. He rubbed a hand over his face, shame rolling through him. I was caught up in the business. Felicity tried to reach me, but I brushed it off, thinking it was about orchard finances or proposals. By the time I realized she was gone, I never followed up. I was too busy to see the signs. Charlie swallowed hard, leaning back against the cushions. So Bryce is older than me? Dominic nodded slowly. Yes, by a few years. He's around 11 or 12, I think. Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. That means all this time, I had a brother out there, living on the streets while we lived here in this giant house. A stab of guilt pierced Dominic's chest. I'm sorry, he whispered, his own voice thick. I can't change the past, but I want to fix it now. Charlie scooted closer, wrapping her small arms around his. He felt her trembling. We have to help him, she said fiercely. He saved my life, Dad. And he's my brother. I want him to be safe, too. Dominic's throat burned with emotion. We will, Charlie. I promise. I'm going to meet Miss Green at the orchard, see what Felicity wrote. After that, I'll go to the shelter or the soup kitchen until I find Bryce. He might not trust me right away, but we have to try. She sniffled, nodding. Then, with a sudden burst of vulnerability, she buried her face in his shirt. Dominic held her close, stroking her hair. The living room felt both expansive and strangely intimate, a father and daughter grappling with secrets that had waited too long to surface. After a while, her breathing steadied. I bet Bryce is really good at orchard stuff since Felicity was, she mumbled. If he'd come live with us, we could do orchard projects together. He wouldn't have to be hungry or cold anymore. Dominic's heart clenched. That's the dream, honey, but let's be patient. Bryce has been hurt, I think, and might need time to open up. Charlie nodded slowly, then switched subjects in that abrupt, childlike way. Could we go back to the orchard, too? I miss it. We used to go with Mom, remember? He had to smile, recalling Addison teaching Charlie how to pick lemons without scratching the delicate rinds. Yes, I do. We'll go soon, maybe tomorrow. I want to see it again myself. Charlie gave him a watery but determined grin. Okay, let's do it. For Bryce. He kissed the top of her head. For Bryce, he echoed. Then he gathered her up, guiding her upstairs to bed, feeling a spark of hope kindle amid the regret. Charlie's acceptance of Bryce, so quick and heartfelt, gave Dominic a sense that maybe, just maybe, they could become a real family in time. Later that night, Dominic stood on the back patio, watching moonlight dance over the ocean's surface. The hush of the waves soothed him, yet his mind stayed alert. He stared at the distant horizon, recalling Addison's last days, how she'd always said the ocean taught her patience. Tides turn on their own schedule, Dominic, she would say with a gentle smile. Bryce has his own tide. Dominic clenched the patio railing. He had no idea if the boy would let him make amends, or if the orchard's forgotten notebooks would reveal Felicity's heartbreak in stark detail. But for Charlie's sake, and for Bryce's sake, he had to follow through. A gust of wind ruffled his hair, carrying the faint tang of salt and seaweed. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself he had a second chance to show Bryce that family could be more than an empty word. Tomorrow, Dominic promised himself. I start bridging the gap, one step at a time. The next morning dawned bright and blue, with seagulls squawking overhead like feisty ushers for a new day. Dominic got up early, sipping black coffee as he gazed out the kitchen window. He had a plan. First, drop Charlie off at her tutor's house for a light day of lessons. She insisted she felt up to it. Then drive straight to the orchard to see Miss Green and rummage through Felicity's notebooks. He kissed Charlie goodbye at the foyer, reminding her to take it easy, and then hopped into his SUV. The drive inland took about half an hour, weaving away from the coastal mansions into lush farmland. The orchard's entrance was marked by a wooden sign painted with the name Graves Orchard and Citrus Research. It used to be Addison's pride and joy, a place that balanced ecological experiments with commercial fruit production. Over the years, though, Dominic had neglected the orchard, focusing instead on shipping deals. He felt a pang as he turned onto the gravel road, Rows of citrus trees extended in tidy lines, orange, lemon, grapefruit dotted with bright, ripening fruit. The early sun cast long shadows, a warm breeze carrying the sweet tang of blossoms. Miss Green was waiting near a small shed with chipped teal paint, her posture stiff but welcoming. As soon as Dominic stepped out, Miss Green offered a handshake. She was in her late 50s, tall and weathered by years in the sun, wearing practical work boots and a denim shirt. "Glad you came," she said, a note of relief in her voice. He nodded, heart heavy with old memories. "Thanks for finding those notebooks. How's everything going otherwise?" She shrugged. "We manage, but the orchard's not what it used to be. Without Addison's enthusiasm or your frequent oversight, we're coasting. Some of Felicity's special crossbreed saplings never got fully tested. They might still be out there, overshadowed by the standard varieties." Dominic brushed a hand across a low-hanging branch of a lemon tree. The fruit felt smooth, almost waxy. "I owe this place an apology, too." Miss Green's gaze softened. "Come on inside. I have the notebooks in the office." Inside the cramped orchard office, dust motes swirled in the light from a narrow window. Stacks of ledgers and old supply binders lined the metal shelving. Miss Green set a small cardboard box onto a wooden desk. These were stuffed in the corner under an old tarp. She must have hidden them there when she got sick. Dominic's hand shook as he lifted the topmost notebook. The cover was plain brown, corners bent. Opening it, he found Felicity's neat handwriting, bullet points detailing orchard tasks. Test cross-pollination between new lemon strain and sweet orange. Discuss greenhouse funding with Dominic? He swallowed. The next pages delved into sketches of root systems, random notes about orchard pests, and then more personal scribbles. "Wish Dominic would respond my last email?" Feeling dizzy again. "Maybe see a doctor?" Can't afford insurance, Dominic felt a stab of guilt. He turned another page, noticing the writing grew more scattered, like Felicity's health was deteriorating. Then a single line caught his eye. "Bryce is 6 months old now. I can't keep going like this alone." His breath caught. He skimmed further, each line a blow to his heart. "I wrote Dominic," but no reply. Maybe he changed his email, or maybe I'm just noise to him. I'll try one more time. If nothing, I'll have to leave the orchard. Bryce deserves better. A hollowness twisted in Dominic's stomach. For so long, he'd pinned the blame on ignorance he hadn't known. But evidence here suggested Felicity had tried, multiple times. She wasn't just some random orchard employee with trivial questions. She was a mother desperately reaching out to the father of her child. "Missy," Green cleared her throat softly. "There are also a few sealed letters." She extracted a small bundle of envelopes tied with a frayed ribbon. "All addressed to you. She never mailed them. Maybe she never had the courage or the resources." Dominic picked up the letters, fingers numb. "God," he whispered. "I failed her so badly." Miss Green's expression was kind, but firm. "Look, you can't change the past, but you can honor her memory by helping Bryce, if that's truly her son." He nodded miserably, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'll do whatever it takes." After reading a portion of Felicity's words, Dominic stepped out to the orchard grounds, searching for a breath of fresh air. The sun was high now, heat pressing down on the fields. The neat rows of citrus trees swayed in a mild breeze, leaves shimmering with each gust. He remembered Addison leading a toddler Charlie through these very paths. Life had seemed simpler then, even if he'd already begun to drift into his business ambitions. He paused under a stately orange tree, grappling with guilt. He pictured Felicity laboring in the orchard, baby Bryce in tow, hoping Dominic might show up. Each neglected email or call formed a chain of regret. If Bryce was truly his son, how many birthdays had he missed? How many nights had the boy slept on a cold bench, feeling abandoned? A distant rumble of a delivery truck snapped him out of his thoughts. "Miss." Green approached from behind. "Everything okay?" He forced a nod. "I need to find Bryce. I have to explain to him that I never meant to leave him behind." She gave a small, supportive smile. "Then go. I can handle the orchard. Just fix this, Dominic, for all our sakes." He offered a shaky smile of gratitude. "Thank you." I won't rest until I do. Dominic left the orchard with the box of Felicity's notebooks and letters in his trunk, driving toward the harbor district. He felt raw, determined, and terrified all at once. Miss Parker had mentioned a community kitchen on West Harbor Street. That was his next destination. The city's waterfront was divided into two distinct zones, a polished marina for tourists and pleasure boats, and the gritty old docks where cargo ships, fishing trawlers, and rust-streaked warehouses dominated. West Harbor Street was definitely in the latter zone, narrow roads with potholes, chain-link fences patched with graffiti. Dominic followed Miss Parker's directions, eventually spotting a modest brick building with a hand-painted sign reading Harbor Community Kitchen. A few people lined up outside for lunch, some looking weary, others quietly chatting. As Dominic parked, he noticed a slender figure inside the open door, someone wearing a faded gray hoodie, messy hair visible from behind. Bryce. Dominic's heart kicked in his chest. He slid out of his SUV, nerves buzzing. He had no plan for the conversation, only the burning need to connect with the boy. The midday sun bore down relentlessly as he approached, footsteps echoing on the cracked sidewalk. A wave of that tangy sea smell washed over him, mingling with the faint aroma of stew drifting from inside. Bryce was busy stacking trays at a long folding table. He hadn't seen Dominic yet, which gave Dominic a chance to observe the kid. Lean, a little taller than the average 11-year-old, with an air of careful composure that didn't match his youth. His shoulders were tense, as though expecting trouble at any moment. Dominic steadied himself, stepping into the doorway. Bryce? The boy's head snapped up, eyes widening. In an instant, Bryce's face hardened. He set the trays down with a loud clatter. "What are you doing here?" Dominic swallowed, heart pounding. "I came to find you. To talk." Bryce's gaze flicked around the small kitchen. Two volunteers stirring soup glanced over curiously, but didn't intervene. The boy looked ready to bolt, like a cornered animal. "I told you, I don't need your thanks or your money. Just leave me alone." Dominic held up both hands, trying to appear non-threatening. "This isn't about money. Listen to me, please. I learned about Felicity, your mom. She worked at my orchard. I had no idea you existed." An emotion flashed across Bryce's eyes, pain, maybe betrayal. "So what? You want a medal for showing up years too late?" Dominic's throat constricted. "No, I just want you to hear me out. Felicity tried to contact me. I have proof in her notebooks, but I never got the messages. Or maybe I ignored them. His voice broke. "I'm sorry, Bryce. I failed her, and I failed you." For a split second, Bryce's mask slipped, revealing the lonely child underneath. But then he shook his head, a bitter smirk curling his lips. "You think sorry fixes everything? She's gone. Cancer. I was alone for years, bouncing between foster homes and the streets." He stepped forward, glaring. "Where were you, Dad?" The word Dad came out dripping with scorn. Dominic's heart clenched. "I can't change what happened," he said softly. "But I can change what happens now. Let me help you. Let me give you a place to stay, a real family with your sister." "Sister?" Bryce barked out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, you mean that girl I saved from the hospital bed? The one who got everything while I got scraps?" "Yes," Dominic murmured. "Her name is Charlie. She's your half-sister, Bryce, and she's worried about you." Something in Bryce's eyes flickered, a shimmer of conflict before he scoffed. "Look, I don't need this. I have people here who care." He jerked his head at the small soup kitchen, the volunteers quietly stirring pots. "I owe them. Not you." Dominic inhaled, swallowing disappointment. "I understand. I won't force anything. But if you ever change your mind, the door is open." Tense silence stretched. Bryce's lip trembled. He turned away, fists clenched at his sides. "Whatever. Just leave me alone," he growled, voice cracking at the end. Dominic's heart sank, but he forced calm. He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket with his cell number, scrawling an address on the back Graves estate. "If you need me, I'll be here." Bryce refused to take it, so Dominic set it on the edge of the folding table and took a step back. "I'm not giving up on you, Bryce. I just want you to know that—" Bryce closed his eyes, jaw tight. Without another word, Dominic turned and walked out, the midday sun harsh on his face. His mind spun with heartbreak, but also with an unyielding resolve. This is just the start, he told himself. I won't abandon him again. Behind him, Bryce still stood in the kitchen doorway, unmoving, as if torn between the anger that defined him and the faint glimmer of hope that he might not be alone anymore. A light haze blanketed the sky when Dominic steered his SUV off the main coastal road and onto the gravel path marked Graves Orchard and Citrus Research. Early morning sun glimmered on the dew, each blade of grass catching the light like tiny shards of crystal. Rolling to a stop by the weathered welcome sign, he cut the engine and gazed ahead. From this vantage, he glimpsed neat rows of citrus trees, their leaves swaying gently in the sea-kissed breeze. The orchard felt alive, yet strangely hushed like it was holding its breath in anticipation. A pang of old memories squeezed his chest, recalling how Addison once strolled these rows with a toddler Charlie, picking lemons the size of tennis balls. Now, Addison was gone, and Charlie was 9, freshly out of the hospital. And Felicity, another important figure he'd neglected, was lost to time. He exhaled slowly. I'm here, he reminded himself. Bryce told me to come. With a firm push, he climbed out into the crisp air, smoothing the front of his casual button-down. He traded the suits for simpler clothes today, sturdy jeans and sneakers. The orchard wasn't the place for expensive loafers or pressed slacks. He wanted to show Bryce and himself that he was ready to get his hands dirty if need be. Halfway down the path, Miss Green emerged from behind a stack of wooden crates. She wore her usual denim shirt, wide-brimmed straw hat shielding her tanned face. Catching sight of Dominic, she lifted a hand in greeting. Didn't expect you so early, boss. I'm hoping to find Bryce, Dominic said, scanning the orchard's edges. Rows of orange and lemon trees stretched out in symmetrical lines, but he couldn't spot that familiar gray hoodie anywhere. He mentioned he comes here sometimes. Miss Green rested a palm on a crate. He was around at dawn checking on some neglected saplings at the far corner, but I haven't seen him since. Dominic's heart thumped. Mind if I look around? She gave a wry grin. Be my guest. Just watch out for patchy irrigation lines near the old shed. Some are half buried or busted. Dominic nodded and headed deeper into the orchard. The morning light cut through the canopy in golden shards, making dust motes shimmer. It smelled of damp earth and sweet citrus blossoms, like nature's own perfume. He threaded between tree trunks, stepping over tangled hoses and the occasional fallen branch, calling Bryce's name softly. At first, he heard nothing but the distant hum of bees. Then, faintly, from the orchard's oldest sector, came the tap-tap-tap of a shovel biting into dirt. Dominic followed the sound until he spotted a figure crouched low, wearing a worn gray hoodie despite the rising temperature. It had to be Bryce. Dominic approached slowly, hands at his sides. The boy was so absorbed in whatever he was doing, digging around the base of a spindly young tree, that he didn't notice Dominic until he was practically at his shoulder. Bryce? Dominic said gently. Bryce's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then the boy exhaled and turned back to his task. Figured you'd show up, he muttered. He jabbed the shovel again, loosening dirt around the roots of a sapling that looked half-starved for nutrients. Its leaves were a sickly yellow, edges curling as if thirsting for care. Dominic took a slow breath. I didn't want to barge in, but you said I'd find you here if I really wanted to understand. Bryce shrugged, refusing to meet his gaze. Trees are straightforward, he said, voice soft but firm. They need consistent water, decent soil, sunlight. Not complicated unlike humans. A pang hit Dominic's chest. The boy wasn't pulling any punches. You're right, Dominic admitted. Humans screw up a lot. Trees don't. Bryce threw him a brief glance of surprise, then pointed to the sapling. This one's from a crossbreed Felicity my mom experimented with. Some variant of sweet tangerine. Miss Green said it never got proper care after Mom left. He jammed the shovel deeper. I'm trying to fix that. Hearing Felicity's name on Bryce's lips cut Dominic in a tender spot. He knelt on the other side of the sapling, picking at clumps of dried mud around the trunk. Your mother was amazing. Her notebooks are filled with creative orchard ideas. I regret not responding to her messages." Bryce's jaw tightened. He dug harder. The shovel's metal edge struck a rock with a clang. Regret doesn't fix a wasted life. Dominic winced. "I know. All I can do now is own my mistakes and be here. For you. For Charlie." At that, Bryce finally lifted his eyes. The orchard's dappled sunlight revealed the uncertainty flickering across his face. "Why bother? I mean, I saved Charlie, sure, but that doesn't wipe out all those years." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead like nature's sigh. Dominic chose his words carefully. "I'm not trying to wipe away the past, but I want a future where you don't have to struggle alone, where we can start over in some way." Bryce leaned on the shovel, breathing heavily from his exertion. "Starting over," he repeated, as though tasting the words. "What if it's too late?" Dominic almost reached out, but he stopped short, letting the boy keep his space. "It's never too late, not as long as we're both willing." A hawk cried overhead, circling the orchard. The moment felt poised on the edge of something like new blossoms on a tree, unsure if they should open. Bryce kicked at a dirt clod, then said, "I don't want pity or empty promises. I only came back here because this orchard was Mom's dream. It's the only place that feels like a piece of her still lives." "Then let's keep it alive together," Dominic said, voice catching. "Not just for her, but for us. We can restore the orchard, push forward Felicity's research. I have resources. You have the passion." A flicker of interest sparked in Bryce's eyes, but he quickly masked it. He set the shovel aside, crouching to pat fresh soil around the sapling's exposed roots. "I told you, I'm not after your money." "I know," Dominic said softly. "I mean physically working here, funding and manpower to fix irrigation, handle the orchard expansion, keep Felicity's legacy going. That's what you want, right? Not charity, just a fair chance." Bryce swallowed. For the first time, he seemed uncertain rather than angry. The orchard's hush cradled them as they knelt on opposite sides of the little tree, each lost in thought. Eventually, the boy rose, brushing dirt from his knees. "I gotta finish here. If you really want to help, grab a trowel." Dominic blinked, relief mingling with a strange excitement. "You sure?" Bryce shrugged again. No smile, but less hostility. "If you can handle it." Dominic slipped off his button-down sleeves and rolled them up, then reached for a spare trowel lying in the grass. He dug into the soil around the tree, loosening it so the roots could spread better. The sun climbed higher, warming his back. Bees buzzed among nearby blossoms, their hum an odd comfort in the silence. They worked side by side for a time, exchanging only a few words about the best way to angle the water channel or how much compost to add. But each small step, each moment, felt like forging a fragile bridge between them. From behind them came Miss Green's voice. "You two need a break?" She approached with a plastic cooler. Her hawk-like eyes took in the sight. Dominic kneeling elbow-deep in orchard soil, Bryce scowling less fiercely than usual. She lifted the cooler. "I brought water and sandwiches. Might as well recharge." Dominic glanced at Bryce for confirmation. The boy gave a curt nod. They walked over to a shady spot beneath an old orange tree with branches drooping under plump fruit. Miss Green handed out water bottles and simple Haman cheese sandwiches. Bryce tore into his like someone who hadn't eaten a decent meal in ages, while Dominic sipped water, chest thudding with the day's emotions. After a moment, Miss Green patted the trunk of the old orange tree. "Your mother planted this one her first year, Bryce. She had a knack for picking good rootstock." Bryce paused mid-bite, blinking rapidly. Then he refocused on his sandwich, quiet. Dominic watched him carefully, an ache behind his ribs. If only Felicity could see him now see them both. As they finished eating, Bryce stood abruptly, wiping crumbs off. "Thanks for the sandwich," he muttered to Miss Green. Then to Dominic, "We should check the irrigation lines near that corner." Dominic set down his water bottle, nodding. "Lead the way." They walked side by side, Miss Green trailing behind with a proud half-smile on her face. The orchard buzzed with midday life cicadas chirping, a warm wind ruffling branches. Dominic's shoulders already ached from digging, but he felt strangely good, as if his efforts were physically manifesting the changes he wanted to make for Bryce. When they reached the orchard's far edge, they encountered a messy tangle of hoses, half buried in muddy trenches. Bryce frowned at the chaos. Water's not getting to some of the younger trees. That's why they're wilting. Dominic crouched, tugging on a cracked hose. We can replace or patch them. If we run new lines from the main reservoir, we'll get a steadier flow. Bryce nodded quietly. Mom always said consistent watering was everything. Miss a day or two in a row and you lose months of growth. Dominic inhaled. The orchard became a metaphor for everything that had happened between them. Neglect, missed calls, lost time. Then let's not miss another day, he said softly, meeting Bryce's gaze. The boy's eyes flickered with something akin to acceptance, if only for a moment. They spent the next hour untangling hoses, patching cracks with rubber tape Miss Green had stocked. Dominic found himself sweating, caked in dirt, but refusing to slow. Bryce was methodical, checking each line for leaks, occasionally muttering instructions. They passed tools back and forth, the orchard's quiet broken by their footsteps and the rustle of leaves overhead. At one point, Miss Green peeled away to tend to another section, leaving father and son alone. A hush fell. Bryce's hoodie slipped down an arm, revealing a thin shoulder sunburned from working in the orchard. Dominic wanted to ask if he was okay, if he needed sunscreen or a break, but he bit his tongue, not wanting to smother the boy. Bryce wasn't a fragile seedling, he was tough as old bark. By midday, they had replaced a good stretch of hoses. At last, water gurgled through the lines, trickling into the parched soil near the wilted saplings. Bryce knelt, dipping a hand into the small puddle forming around one trunk. That's it, he said, voice low. Now they have a chance. Dominic crouched beside him, swallowing a lump of emotion. So do we. Bryce didn't reply, but he didn't pull away. For now, that was enough. Under the orchard's sun-dappled canopy, father and son found a small measure of peace, bound by Felicity's legacy and the shared labor of nurturing new life from old roots. Charlie sat in the passenger seat next to Dominic, nose practically pressed to the window. Her eyes lit up when the orchard sign came into view. We're here, she breathed, excitement lacing her tone. She'd been begging to visit the orchard ever since she'd gotten out of the hospital, determined to see the place that had brought her father and Bryce together. Dominic eased the car into a parking spot near a small tool shed. Yes, but remember, he said gently, you're still regaining your strength. No heavy lifting, okay? Charlie wrinkled her nose in mock annoyance. I know, Dad. I'm not planning on hauling sacks of fertilizer. He tried not to smile at how grown-up she sounded. Between recovering from a life-threatening condition and learning she had an older brother, Charlie had matured in a whirlwind of weeks. They climbed out, greeted by the orchard's soft hush. The sky above was a brilliant blue, dotted with a few wispy clouds. The air smelled of citrus blossoms and fresh-turned earth, with a hint of sea salt drifting inland. Dominic inhaled, letting the orchard calm his nerves. As they walked down the main path, Miss Green emerged from behind a row of grapefruit trees. Charlie, good to see you on your feet. Charlie beamed at her. Hi, Miss Green. Dad keeps telling me about how Bryce is working here, right? Miss Green's smile widened. Indeed. That boy's got a knack for orchard care. He's around here somewhere, probably checking saplings. I can show you. Dominic's stomach nodded with equal parts anticipation and caution. How will Bryce react to Charlie being here? He wondered. They hadn't exactly formalized a schedule. Bryce came and went on his own terms, but Charlie's presence might be the key to bridging this awkward gap once and for all. They followed Miss Green along a dirt path, weaving past lemon trees drooping with pale yellow fruit. Charlie's eyes scanned everything with awe. She'd visited this orchard as a toddler, but her memories were fuzzy. Now she was old enough to appreciate the place in all its natural charm. After a few minutes, they spotted Bryce kneeling by a cluster of newly planted saplings, carefully pressing soil around their stems. He still wore that battered gray hoodie, but the sleeves were pushed up, revealing forearms streaked with dirt. At the sound of footsteps, he glanced over, tensing slightly. Charlie's face lit up, and she rushed forward, though mindful not to push too hard. "Bryce?" He paused, straightening as she reached him. His expression flickered between wary and curious. "You're Charlie," he said, voice low. She nodded, smiling despite his guarded posture. "Dad told me a lot about you." A nervous laugh escaped her. "I guess we're, siblings?" Bryce's gaze darted to Dominic, who hung back a few yards, letting them have a moment. Then Bryce exhaled, turning back to Charlie. "Yeah, so it seems," he said quietly. He wiped his hands on his hoodie. "Are you feeling better? After the hospital?" Charlie's grin widened. "So much better, and that's all thanks to you." Her eyes grew misty. "I never got to say it in person. Thank you for saving my life." Bryce's cheeks reddened beneath the orchard's filtered sunlight. He quickly looked away, scuffing a boot on the ground. "It wasn't a big deal." Charlie shook her head emphatically. "It was a huge deal. We can't ever repay you." Bryce let out a soft huff, half embarrassment, half acceptance. "You don't have to. I just did what I could." Awkward silence settled, broken by Miss Green clearing her throat politely. "I'll, leave you kids to chat. Dominic, could you help me load some fertilizer bags onto the cart?" Dominic caught Miss Green's subtle nod, recognizing her attempt to give the two children space. He followed her down the path, leaving Charlie and Bryce by the saplings. Charlie hovered by Bryce, eyes raking over the small orchard patch. The saplings had leaves that shimmered a soft, pale green, some drooping from dryness. Charlie crouched gingerly, not wanting to strain herself. "They look kind of sad," she said softly, brushing a fingertip against a curling leaf. Bryce nodded. "They're a variant Mom was trying to develop, some cross between tangerine and sweet lime. They grow slow, need more water than normal." He bit his lip. "Dad Dominic, I guess, is helping me fix the irrigation lines. We're getting there. Dad told me about the orchard's trouble after Mom Addison passed." Charlie's voice trembled slightly, but she pressed on. "I think he regrets not paying attention sooner to both of you." Bryce frowned, memories flashing in his dark eyes. "He told me he regrets a lot. Doesn't change the fact that I grew up with nothing." Charlie lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We never knew. He never told me anything about Felicity, or you. I'm sure if he'd known—" "It's not your fault," Bryce said, cutting her off gently. "I can't blame you for something you had no say in." She swallowed a rush of relief at his words. Even if it wasn't total forgiveness, it felt like a start. "Well, maybe we can make new memories," she offered. "Dad wants us to fix the orchard. I want that too. I still remember a little about picking lemons here with my mom." Bryce's features softened at the mention of Addison. He shifted on his heels. "I heard about her, Addison, I mean. People say she was kind, big on family like my mom was." Charlie nodded, eyes tearing up. "She was. She loved this place. She had a dream of turning the orchard into a special retreat for families. She'd talk about building a little visitor center so kids could learn how fruit grows." A moment of shared sadness flickered between them. Charlie's breath hitched. "So maybe, if we work together, we can keep both our moms' dreams alive?" Bryce let out a shaky sigh, some of his tension melting away. "Maybe," he echoed. They fell quiet, letting the orchard's gentle rustling speak for them. Overhead, a cluster of birds darted between branches. The sun glinted on the horizon, promising a warm midday. Finally, Charlie brightened. "Hey, want to show me around? I've only seen pictures of the orchard from Dad's old albums. Maybe you can show me what you've been working on?" An uncertain half-smile tugged at Bryce's lips. "Sure, if you can keep up, but no heavy lifting." She laughed lightly, relieved he wasn't shutting her out. "Deal." Bryce guided Charlie through rows of young trees, explaining which strains Felicity had experimented with. He pointed out subtle leaf differences, the fragrances that hinted at possible hybrid traits. For her part, Charlie soaked in every word, occasionally asking shy questions about Felicity's favorite soil mixes or how cross-pollination worked. In some corners, they saw evidence of the orchard's prior neglect patches of weeds, cracked irrigation lines, diseased branches. Bryce's frustration flared when he described how much had gone overlooked, but Charlie's curious admiration seemed to ease his tension. She apologized more than once for hogging Dad's time and not knowing you were out there, which only made Bryce shuffle uncomfortably. Eventually, they reached a small clearing dominated by a gnarled old lemon tree with a battered wooden bench under it. Warm sunlight broke through the canopy here, lighting up the clearing like a natural stage. Charlie paused, glancing at Bryce. "This is really peaceful." He nodded. "Mom used to rest here when she was too tired to keep going." His voice caught. "She'd just sit and draw in her notebook or hum lullabies. Told me that if the orchard thrived, so would I." Charlie blinked back tears. "She sounds like she loved you a lot. Addison was the same. Even when she got sick, she told me stories about how each fruit tree had its own personality. That's how I learned to appreciate plants." Bryce stared at his scuffed sneakers. "Mom never got to finish her research. She always said she needed Dominic's support, but—" He clenched his jaw. Charlie quietly slid onto the wooden bench. "Could you do it?" she asked softly. "Finish it for her with our help?" He looked up, heart pounding. "I may be. I don't have her knowledge, but Miss Green's been teaching me. And Dominic, he's got resources. And then there's you." He forced a small shrug. "You seem pretty eager." She smiled, voice trembling. "Because it feels like we can keep them both alive in a way your mom and mine." Through the orchard. For a beat, neither spoke. Then Bryce lowered himself onto the bench beside her, not too close, but close enough to sense a shared warmth. The orchard's hush wrapped around them like a gentle blessing. In the distance, they heard Dominic calling Charlie's name. The moment lingered, then dissolved as Bryce rose to his feet. "He probably wonders if you're okay. Should we go back?" Charlie nodded, but before she followed, she blurted, "I'm really glad you're here, Bryce. I hope you'll stay." The boy's eyes darted away. "I'll think about it." But the corners of his mouth twitched in something resembling the faintest smile. They made their way back toward the orchard's main path, shoulder to shoulder. And though the orchard was still full of broken irrigation lines and half-wilted trees, a seed of quiet hope had taken root between them, ready to blossom if they nurtured it right. A swift breeze swept inland from the ocean, ruffling the orchard's canopy as Dominic strode down a dirt path. His mind buzzed with 1,000 details: further orchard repairs, new water lines, potential expansions. But mostly, he was thinking about Bryce. The boy's come so far, Dominic told himself, but he's still got one foot out the door. That uneasy feeling persisted, even after the progress they'd made. Bryce was teaching him orchard techniques, sure, and Charlie had formed a tentative bond with her half-brother, but the tension lingered. One wrong move, Dominic feared, and Bryce would vanish back into the shadows of city shelters or the streets. He spotted Miss Green hauling a wheelbarrow of fertilizer near the orchard's entrance. He waved her over. "Have you seen Bryce today?" She leaned on the handles, catching her breath. "He said he'd head in later after checking something at the old greenhouse, but I haven't heard from him since morning." A frown tugged at Dominic's lips. "All right, let me know if you see him." Miss Green arched an eyebrow. "He's not exactly on a time clock. The orchard is more a safe haven for him than a job site." Dominic grunted. "I realize that. He shoved his hands in his pockets, gaze shifting across rows of young citrus. "I want to keep track of him. Make sure he's safe." Miss Green's gaze softened with empathy. "Give him space, Dominic. He'll come around at his pace." Dominic nodded, appreciating her insight but still feeling restless. He thanked her and turned toward a paved walkway leading to the orchard's renovated service area, a small building that once housed Addison's horticultural office. The plan was to modernize it for Felicity's hybrid research. He mused on the idea of dedicating it to both mothers' memories,